This is Secrets to Win Big, your roadmap to sustained growth. Brought to you by Arjun Sen, founder and CEO of Zen Mango, brand whisperer, top brand growth driver, and a former Fortune 500 executive who has been called one of the most marketing intelligent minds in the business. Find him at zenmango.com. And now, here's your host, Arjun Sen.
Hi, welcome to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen. This is Arjun, and it's truly a pleasure to welcome you to this episode of Secrets to Win Big. Winning is fun, but winning big puts you on the path to sustainable long-term wins. And here you would hear from leaders from all walks of life to share different paths. Today, my true honor is to have Tom Ryan as my VIP guest. Tom is the founder of Smashburger. Based on his formal education, Tom is a pure food scientist who went all the way to get a PhD. But then in Tom's professional career, which is full of mega impacts, he had key development roles starting at Procter Gamble and Pillsbury. From there, from product, packaged goods, he went to restaurants where he joined Pizza Hut in late 1980s and quickly brought very iconic products which all of you even today know and love. And love I use intentionally because the Lovers line started under Tom's guidance and leadership and went on to Sicilian pizza, stuffed crust pizza, and Brie brought all of these to the marketplace. But Tom just didn't stop there. Next, as CMO and worldwide chief concept officer at McDonald's, he and his team brought McFlurries, Dollar Menus, McGriddles to the marketplace, but this time at a bigger scale, not just in US, but around the world. In 2006, Tom partnered with Rick Shadden to set out to build Smashburger, which has been named twice as Forbes' America's Most Promising Company. Tom is also the founder of Tom's Urban and Tom's Watch Bar, a full-service urban concept designed to provide great multi-ethnic food, craft beers, and cocktails. Welcome, Tom. Truly an honor.
It is great to be here, Arjun. Thanks for having me.
So, Tom, your fascinating journey starts with you being a food scientist, and then you go into packaged goods at Procter Gamble. So, how did the Procter Gamble experience get you ready for the future restaurants and the big impact you have had?
It was an interesting experience going from grad school where you were in control of your own timing and destiny. It was really great. The great experience at Procter was to get into a company that really valued technical innovations, functional technical innovations, and then apply them with a lot of regimen and discipline to make sure that their products had a high level of performance. So it was a really great first step to make a transition from an academic environment to a business environment. But for me personally, it had some limitations. It was all about function, no form. And it was really tough in that day to be creative because the innovation around technical attributes, be it removing grease or be it more flavor of coffee, those things were already present, were already driving a lot of the technical approaches. And so I found myself wishing and hoping and looking for opportunities to get closer to the consumer where I could find a better balance between function, which is hugely important, and form, which is what really motivates people's choices, desires, and basically makes them really interested in product development.
So help me understand a little bit more, Tom. This is so fascinating about function and form. How does function and form influence choices?
Well, I'll give you a great example from back in those days. One of the key projects I worked on at Procter Gamble was the Duncan Hines cookies, which were the soft and chewy cookies. And it was amazing. This is my first real scintilla that there was something that needed to get scratched that I wasn't going to get taken care of at Procter was when I compared our advertising. Our major competitor was Keebler. And we were showing chocolate chips point onto a scale, demonstrating that we had more. And Keebler had Ernie the elf in a tree with wafts of beautiful cookie aroma. And it just spoke to the fact that function without aesthetic is lost on people who don't have an aesthetic value in their life. And to me, what I was seeing emerge, even in those early days in the late 80s, there was this tremendous underlying growth of American consumers taking on the need for much more aesthetic value, eye candy, taste innovation, all the things that really set up the path for restaurants to be what they became, which is the preferred way to eat, and all the great creativity around that and other products that can apply that to themselves. So really it was that's really the balance between form and function. What I saw was you had to have pure high integrity functionality in everything you do. Products have to perform. But in the absence of the story and the imagery that makes those things uber attractive, that pays off that function, I think it's a lost cause. And so, that was one of my major reasons for cutting my teeth at Procter & Gamble and then making a decision to go someplace else.
And you have a very rare combination of experience, because if you look at 1980s, 90s until early 2000, most of us in the industry, either we were schooled in the PepsiCo way or the Procter & Gamble way. And that's where we always went back to the core, and you have both unique learnings together. Of course, at PepsiCo, you came in at a higher level to make contributions right away. So I just want to look at, there's not just one, because, if there was one success, Tom, it's luck. But again, for you, there's a pattern of success from stuffed pizza to Sicilian crust to McDonald's everywhere. So two questions is, how do you see a market opportunity? And then how do you find the right product? Like, how do you know you're pushed enough to reach critical mass?
Yeah. Well, I think the answer to your first question is, how do you find the opportunity? I think there's several really strong ways to see it. Some of them are obvious, and some of them you have to be a little bit more intuitive. And I think one of the unique elements that I have is I have a fairly large intuitive attribute in my psyche that helps me. But I do think that I think consumer demand, and quite frankly, in my opinion, consumer complacency, which is really latent demand, is the best way to look at the marketplace and understand where are there things that haven't been done yet. And the telltale signs of that is when you see entire categories starting to act like each other and blunt each other and try to take away people's advantage by doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. That makes a ton of sense from a product portfolio approach to your business. But at the same time, think about it from what it does to consumers. It gives them mass market options that are generally indistinguishable from each other. And so, it's kind of a natural cycle, especially in the U.S. mass market, that people spend more time blunting each other than trying to figure out how to do something unique and different. So I think that's the easiest answer for how you see the opportunity. And then sometimes competitors drive you there. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a little bit of a balance. One of the products that I think is a fascinating story we'll tell some other time. I did a product at Pizza Hut called Bigfoot Pizza, and it was designed to basically take away the advantage of Little Caesars pizza by basically giving people more pizza at the same price, but formatted in a different way that would probably make a side-by-side comparison an advantage to Pizza Hut at the time doing Bigfoot. And that was, that insight, that aha moment to get to that product design, and then the following attributes that made it taste great, et cetera, that was driven not by an intuitive sense. It was not driven by understanding an unmet consumer need. It was looking at a competitor who was finding traction in the marketplace and then doing what I call one-upping them, is finding a better way to execute their core strength with a meaningful difference for consumers. Not a copycat meaningful difference, but a really unique, meaningful difference. And in the value game, it's more, right? It's great tasting stuff, but give people more of it. So those are probably the two biggest dynamics, I would say, as I look at blank pages in certain categories. I always look at what's there and how happy and how consistent is that across the marketplace, and what's not there that could be a big idea to explore. The second part of your question is, how do you manage that? I was fortunate enough early in my career at Pizza Hut to adopt a process from my mentor. one of my mentors, who really did a great job using heavy category users of specific product categories to really understand what motivates them and then to bounce ideas off them in a very iterative way. So you weren't doing thumbs up, thumbs down analysis. You were kind of guiding your way to find the target. And then once you found the target, the emotional target, the purchase behavior-based target, then we went at optimizing attributes really greatly. So whether it was taste or appearance or even value, we worked really hard on those things to bring all three of those dimensions together. And when you do that, guided by what consumers think are really interesting, different, and at the same time equally or more relevant, that's where you come up with big wins.
Wow. So to me, this was so fascinating for you to help me see that the first, you trust your intuitive attribute, your psyche, about the opportunities. Then you're also showing me and showing all of us that one of the places we need to avoid is stop spending time in blunting each other because you're not moving anything there. And then you connect to the unmet consumer needs, but the need is met, as you talked about, is a meaningful difference as seen by guests. I think that's very powerful. That leads me, sorry, go ahead, please.
Once you establish that target, to me, I always say this to people, because they ask me, oh, you're an inventor. And I actually think of myself more as an innovator. And I think the difference is this: invention is creating things. And some of those things have purpose and some of them don't have differing levels of purpose. Innovation is creating things with a purpose. And so at the heart of everything I've ever done that's been highly successful, whether it's stuffed crust pizza or McGriddles or the Smashburger brand or anything else we want to talk about, what was in the core of that idea, okay, what was the notion that we had a point of view that consumers found interesting, relevant, and motivating. And to me, we've fleshed everything out around it, but at the end of the day, that's what true innovation is. It's invention with purpose. And if that purpose is to re-evolve something that already exists for somebody in a meaningful way, big wins.
Awesome. So you're listening to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen, and my VIP guest today is Tom Ryan, founder of Smashburger. And if I use three words to describe him, he is literally a new product magician. And I love the way, Tom, you use simple terms. You look at what is there, but people are not happy. And what is not there, if you bring to the marketplace, people will be happy. And you define innovation as creation with a purpose. Instead of inventing could be just random creation. So now let's go back to 2007. At that point of time, Americans were eating a lot of burger, like ballpark. I was doing, Googling to show my Google skills, that people on an average were eating 7 burgers a week. Okay. From a layman's point of view, we didn't need another burger place. Like, what made you see the opportunity and exactly followed the whole path to create this new brand?
Yeah, in the last 15 years, I've probably answered this question more than anything else because everybody wants to know. You're right. I mean, burgers back in 2007 were a $100 billion category in and of themselves, and generally owned by the 3 big brands, one of which I worked for, McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's. And I had a sense, me and my team back in the early 2000s had a sense that something wasn't as relevant with the core of McDonald's as it could have been, which is namely burgers. And we went out and we were seeing our sales go up, but we were seeing our loyalty scores go down. At the end of the day, I am a scientist and I do look at data. And I found that relationship was quite amazing. And when we went and probed on that, what we found was people were buying our burgers, but they were very dispassionate about those burgers. And sometimes a consumer, I've had this happen maybe 10 times in my life, but sometimes a consumer, when you're behind the glass, says something that you never forget. And I remember, I think I was in someplace in the Midwest, and a woman said, we were asking, okay, so if all burgers are the same, what makes you make the decisions you make? And she said, if I'm driving down the street, if one brand is on the right and one hand's on the left, I take the right-hand turn because it's easier. And I thought, here we are, a 20 billion market cap company with our core historic heritage equity based on a right or left-hand turn. So when we studied that a little more, what we found out was that Americans, all for good purposes over the years, we had commoditized burgers, made them fast, made them cheap, made them convenient to get, at the expense of what I would call, key mosaics in a modern architecture, which is quality, integrity, and the ability to tell stories that resonate with people. I called that dynamic, the sales up and the loyalty down, I called that the latent demand of dissatisfaction. And I believed in that strongly. And I got others to believe in that strongly because everybody said we don't need another burger place. And I said, if you knew what I knew, by the way, to answer a question later, what I love when I wake up in the morning is thinking about what I know that nobody else knows that we can take advantage of. But anyway, I felt that way for years. And I had to leave McDonald's to actually act on it. And that's when I met Rick in 2000. I moved to Denver in 2003, helped him do some things at Quiznos, which I'm rather proud of. But then we wanted to build disruptive brands that would redefine existing categories. And Smashburger was the first of those. So we actually we practiced the craft of making sure that we were going to be unique and different in key attributes, but only those that consumers really cared about: taste, quality, richness, appearance. And we built the entire Smashburger brand on having key points of differentiation that people could get passionate about instead of just acquiesce to. And that amalgam of attributes, whether it was Haagen-Dazs in the shakes, whether it was certified Angus beef in our smashing technique and our proprietary seasoning, artisan buns, proprietary sauces, you name it. There's a whole litany. There's 50 things I could tell you about Smashburger that made it special. But all of those things came to the table and the fore in order to have a highly differentiated concepts that consumers would appreciate at every turn.
So I think just listening to you describe the Smashburger burgers gets me hungry. So let's just walk away from food for a second.
Sure.
And, if you take your experience and everything you've talked about, I'm already seeing that any one of us, all of us who are listening who are not in restaurants, there's so many nuggets to use. So what would be a few nuggets of advice for those who are in new product development and brand development, but not in restaurants? What would be your advice to them?
I really think the key is, look, the title of this series is Big Wins. And I really think that there are certain categories to work in where you can really do like exceptional innovation, particularly around things like technology and medicine. And those things are really important. But in the main, in consumer goods, which I only want to express things that I'm really comfortable with, which is really the consumer side of things. I think the best, and a lot of people get distracted by this one thing, you have to focus on heavy category users. The bigness of ideas is a function of the bigness of the categories in consumer goods. And to be honest with you, my personal belief, it's not a rule or a law, my personal belief is that consumers are very slow to adopt radically new things unless they enable technology, medicine, things like that. But in the world of let's talk about it, in the world of fashion, in the world of packaged goods, in the worlds of restaurant, in the worlds of cars, whatever other disposable, everyday, maybe not every day, but lifetime purchases you make, the key to success, to be big, is to focus on how do you make heavy category users intrinsically happier than they are now. And just the sheer scope of where you spend your time hedges your bet that you're going to be working on things that have a meaningful difference to many more people, and B, there's a lot of them to talk to, there's a lot of them to study, there's a lot of them to see. So I think that's a big piece of advice that goes outside the restaurant category, and I'll distill it down to this: if you're not focusing on heavy category users, you're not focusing on the right thing.
So as we start looking at, I'm just reflecting on your career where you have had, you led marketing organizations, then you led global organizations, and then as a founder, you put right teams in place. What are some of the traits that you look at which are most important for future leaders in organizations where you're placing them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I believe in three things that make for successful organizations. I believe in process, I believe in talent, and I believe in structure. And so if you have those things right, and they ladder up to what you're trying to achieve, generally you win. As it relates to people and hiring, I look for three things in no particular order, but they're all very important. I love people with passion. People are willing to go the extra distance, to think harder, to think outside the box. Well, however you want to define personal passion. For some people, it's just doing the same thing better than anybody else. For some people, it's doing things different. But passion counts. Personal integrity is a ton. And then talent, that you can actually put together a structure of multidimensional talent to get things done, because no one wins alone. So I think, when I interview people at the CEO level, or even now, or I have to assess partners, I always look for how these people, how their passion, how their integrity, and how their talent fits into a well-designed process, talent, and structure that gets things done.
So what's the difference to you between process and structure?
So it's a great question. So process is the way you do things. They basically give you paradigmic internal standards to work against. So as an example, I have a new product process that I use for everything as big as a concept down to an individual product, that basically involves recruiting heavy category users and bouncing ideas off of them and using them iteratively to fine tune ideas. That's a process. It is a great process. If the people listening to the outcome of that aren't the right people, or all the same people, then that process gets applied to a structure that doesn't know how to take that outcome and do things with it. And so a process is how you look at things, how you manage things, how you meter and how you read things that are essential to what you're trying to get done, whether it's analytics, financial analytics, whether it's creative processes, doesn't really matter. And structure makes sure that you have the roundness and fullness of team, so that there's enough people to carry the baton on the front end, and there's enough people to close with success on the back end. But and by the way, certain processes are relevant for certain parts of that structure, and certain processes aren't. So it is an organic process, and every company who I've ever had great success had a great sense of how to use those three things actually effectively.
I love that. Process, talent, and structure. I love the definition, the roundness and fullness of a team to build them together. Tom, in this journey of talking to leaders, one of the things I see is with every leader, they all want to act. Of course, they have a process, they think. And when they act, there's a decent amount of stubbornness. Once the train leaves the station, they have to get to the goal. And which means, a lot of them start taking words out of their dictionary. Like for athletes I've talked to, they just say no does not exist. What are a few words or phrases that doesn't exist in Tom Ryan's dictionary?
Mediocrity is the easy one. Consensus is an easy one. As I already mentioned, blunting is an easy one. I think the key words that are missing are things that would speak to, in my vocabulary, are things that would speak to complacency and settling. I never settle. And even when we have a big success, I always ask myself, what's next? How do we build on that? Where do you take that? Because, I kind of look at developing things in general it's like a movie. It's got to be, I've never talked to a movie producer. I would love to, but it's got to be like a movie. And every movie producer, I'm sure, watches their product and then covers their eyes on certain scenes and says, man, would I like to do that different? I feel that way about everything I do. So I think, it's not a word that I could omit, but a word that I like is like constantly challenging ourselves to take things to the next level. I think next leveling is really key in the market these days.
I really love the first two words that you said doesn't exist, is mediocre and seeking consensus. And I just feel they are so well connected that so many of us, in the process of getting consensus, the train or the plane leaves and we are still standing on where we are. And of course, when you talked about a film producer, I just have to give a little shout out for my baby brother in India. Oni, he produced this documentary and he is a perfectionist. It's called Asur, A-S-U-R. And recently we were looking at reviews where this is being recognized as the number one over other Netflix to other productions, but it's the margin of win. It's getting 65% of votes, whereas others are not even in teens. Of course, I'm biased. Maybe they're in teens, okay? But I just wanted to throw a shout out for my baby brother. Poor guy is sleeping right now, but when he wakes up, he'll hear and be very proud.
Yeah.
So coming to something more serious right now, with COVID-19, things are, none of us know what's going on. So what's your secret to succeed during these times? How are you helping brands during these times?
Well, I think every brand has their own set of circumstances. I do think this. I do think one of the keys to success is just to be kind. Mm-hmm. Be as kind as you can in whatever circumstances this virus throws your way, whether it's being kind to your customers, being kind to your employees, being, kind to your teammates, being kind to your family. It's very stressful. And I think it's amazingly easy to take this out on other people. So I'm very, and I borrowed this. The Smashburger team talks about being kind, mm-hmm. and they're taking it to a different level in everything they do. I think patience is also a key virtue through this, mm-hmm. And sometimes it's the patience to act, to wait to act, and sometimes it's the patience not to act at all. Smashburger is thriving, honestly, because of some really interesting new avenues of revenue that they generated, as well as a focus on off-premise. So they're great. On the other end, Tom's Watch Bar sit in areas where, communal sporting events happen and communal watching events happen. And, the kindness there is not to open because we really don't want to give people, mm-hmm. The occasion to be involved in that because it just makes sense in the long term. So I think kindness and patience, mm-hmm. And by patience there's another factor to that, which is perseverance. I think this will be over at some point in time, but I think those who are smart about it, steer through it with patience and kindness, are going to win on the other side.
Wow. You're listening to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen, and today my VIP guest is Tom Ryan, founder of Smashburger Restaurants. And again, the three words to describe him are new product magician. Few things that Tom said in the last few minutes, and if you just signing in late, are the three words that Tom talked about is not in his dictionary. And I really think those are very important at the beginning of a leader's journey. To take these out totally is being mediocre, seeking consensus, and blunting each other. Because I think that becomes a survival mindset in the middle of the pack. If you say and outrun one more animal in your pack, you survive that day, but that doesn't make you the king of those group. And I really also feel that, Tom, this was such a great advice because all of us are really panicking or most of us are panicking during current times about what you talked about, being kind and being patient. So one thing I want to look at is that, most business leaders, especially when either their incentives or short-term success, everything is connected to their short-term success. They focus so much of the short-term success, it takes you into a dead end, and then the brand gets stuck. How do you balance short-term and long-term success? Like, this was a question I really was planning to know from you, because looking at Lover's Line to some of these, which are sustained, was a lot of things came and went. So how do you see the blend of short-term and long-term success?
Yeah. So look, at the end of the day, successful companies have vital sustaining growth. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the mindset that helps you get to those long-term wins, and I'll come back to short-term in a minute, is that I've always viewed the brands I work for as signing up to write the next chapter in a book. Mm-hmm. Because brands have history, brands have legacy, and quite frankly, equity begets equity, and lack of equity does the same thing. So I think the moves brands make as part of a long-term brand, usually the bigger brands, they basically have a long-term consequence of trust and belief. And so I think building products with great attributes, strong promises that motivate people, and then fulfillment of those promises through the product that actually are better than the promise, that's the key. And you can get to that, but it requires patience. And almost everything I can think of that took a long time or was very successful took longer than the prevailing pressures of the business did. Mm-hmm. So what you have in the meantime is promotions. And I think promotional products, which you can do without as much homework, to basically test the waters and see how things go. They provide, it's kind of news for news sake. They provide short-term news. You design them so that you never hurt or damage the reputation of the brand, but they're not necessarily built for enduring value. And I think in my world, in restaurants, what you need is a balance of those two things, because sometimes, no matter how much homework you do, promotional items can be more popular than you think, and so they last. Mm-hmm. So it's a great way to get out there, interact with consumers, see some things in real time. But I do think that when you look at the core products, at least the ones I've worked on, McGriddles and pepperoni lovers and stuffed crust pizza, those all have in their name something that you have to deliver on in a way that nobody delivered on it before. Mm-hmm. And I think if you get that homework done, you market it effectively and well and own it, it will be with you for a long time.
So Tom, as you talk about all these, there's somewhere you have a source from where you learn. So what's your core inspiration? Who did you learn? A situation or a person that inspired you the most?
Yeah, I've thought about this question a lot. I had a mentor at Pizza Hut who was really, really a genius guy when it related to process and how to interact with consumers. But he didn't have the same creative bent. And so he gave me a key piece to the puzzle of what I ended up more or less patenting into the approach that made all these product efforts very successful. He's one. Mm-hmm. And he was great. And I lost him in the early 2000s. But I think about him often, and he was great. His name was Rich Biederman. A couple other people in my life, I had a major professor in college who taught me that to be fearless in my thinking and to be avant-garde in my approach to a PhD education, which I did most of my coursework in the College of Business, which was very avant-garde. And then, the last person I just want to mention in my formative years, because we're going to talk about my wife in a second here, I think, I have to credit my dad. And my dad did reinforce in me one thing over and over and over again. When I stumbled with my multiplication tables, when I forgot how to add 8 plus 7, which I tend to have a mental block on, he told me, study it until you know it. And when you know it, you know it. And you know what? I've found that to be really wise information for me to remember, a wise point to remember when things are cloudy, or when I need to know things. It gives me the drive not to settle.
So talking about family, this next question has a little setup. I want to take you back to 1991. Young Arjun had just joined Pizza Hut. You may not remember, but we were at the end of a focus group. I was fortunate to sit with you, and I had asked you this question because there was a certain member of a senior management team or anything like that had some character issues or anything. Let's just keep it right there. But that's not the story. The story is that day, what you taught me was, Arjun, you cannot compartmentalize integrity. You taught me integrity either you have or you don't. You have in all aspects of life. And that has always stayed with me because I've also used that to hire people because I golf with them. If they cheat on golf, I know these bozos will cheat every day. So to me, that's the part where I really want to ask is, during your entire career, you have always achieved amazing wins, but at the same time, you have put family first. Okay, everyone knows how you define yourself every time, as a loving husband to amazing Jody, who also was so, we are grateful to her. She set us, we had audio problems. She was always there for us. And then for the kiddos, you always have been there for every kiddos, every moment, every event, anywhere in the planet. And the kiddos also made it challenging for you to be every corner of the world. What's the secret for work-life balance?
It's a great question. First of all, I married my best friend, which is really important. So, and I put my family in the center of my universe. I love doing what I do at work, but to be honest with you, it's a means to an end. And that end is to make sure everybody's happy and safe and satisfied and actually, is in a pleasant environment and cloud most of the time. But I would tell you this: the work-life balance is really amazing when you have that at home, and you believe and you know you have that at home. Um, I have the best life in the world because when I go to work in the morning, I can't wait to get there because I know things that people don't that I can take advantage of and develop. And I have great, passionate, integrity and talented people to join. And then when I'm done, I can't wait to go home because I have the same thing in different ways. That just the joy of being comfortable and either being quiet or not being quiet, but it's just karmic. So I've been fortunate over my life for some reason to be able to have the same lifestyle at work that I have at home.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something intrinsically magic about that because a lot of people have to check some of themselves at the door when they go to work, mm-hmm. or leave something behind at work when they go home. I feel very blessed that I don't suffer from either one of those. And I think it just makes life easy and rewarding without having to try too hard. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but it makes life easy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and also the thing that you talked about is being the same person, whether you're at home or at work, makes it so much easier. Because growing up, my grandma was a very big influence. I called her Mighty, and she always reminded me, one, be the same person in front of her, in school, anywhere else. And she always pushed me by saying, if you are the same person always, then you have a great idea about who you are. Only then can you improve. Otherwise, you have some false facades. The second thing she also said, Arjun, you will never be perfect. But if you accept who you are, that gives you the base to get better. And I really appreciate what you talked about. So now let's go to something really, unique, take you to a totally different level. If Tom Ryan today goes and meets this incredible kid doing PhD in food science, what advice would he give that young Tom Ryan getting ready to finish his PhD?
Be patient, more patient. I wish I knew a long time ago before it finally caught on in my head, clicked in my head, that no one wins alone. I mean, the problem with being a PhD is you are an individual contributor until you're not. And obviously, that's a learned trait to make a transition from, being the center of your own universe to feeling that you're part of something bigger with other people. So I wish I knew that earlier. And I think the other thing is that, you can learn a lot from the best people around you, but mm-hmm. you can learn more from the worst people around you. And, at the time I was leaving school, everybody I was with in school was generally the same person from an experiential point of view. And then you get out into the real world and I wish I would have spent more time watching the people dynamics of success and watching the people dynamics of failure earlier. It would have helped me. I can think of 2 or 3 times when that would have helped me. And the last thing, and I've done this twice in my life, I think. It's what I call taking a left-hand turn, which is the harder turn. Mm-hmm. When I decided to go on for a PhD, I wasn't committed to doing that, and I decided to do it, and that was a left-hand turn for me. It was not what every part of me wanted to go do. And then obviously leaving the packaged goods business, which is the path that most people with my background are destined to, it was a big risk for me and a left-hand turn to go out of the packaged goods business into the restaurant business. And now I can't think about it any other way. And then quite frankly, leaving my last biggest company, the biggest food company in the world, was a bit of a left-hand turn because I realized at that time that what was motivating me personally was to create with teams who spent their whole time creating. And I was becoming an administrator, and I was like a gladiator that had to watch from the seats. And the left-hand turn was giving up all that, which is easy, by the way, and it's comfortable. It's not real stressful most of the time, but it wasn't dynamic. And so the last left-hand turn I took was to leave McDonald's and come to Denver and do much more entrepreneurial things, which have been tremendously satisfying.
So Tom, building on processes, every leader I talk to, they have processes because, I always find that success without a plan or a process cannot be repeated. It's a one-time miracle. and you have a career full of amazing accomplishments which have sustained. So what's the first thing you do when you wake up, and what's the last thing when you're winding down from work day? What do you do?
The first thing I do, assuming I know exactly, so our businesses are a little amorphous, so it's not always a predictable business, which I kind of like. But while I'm getting ready to go to work, I look at my calendar first thing in the morning. I do all my emails, so I'm kind of set up to really tackle the biggest thing I have in the day. I feel that in the work time where I'm actually working on specific things, the key to success is to really focus as much energy as I can on the biggest thing you have to manage that day. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. The last thing I do is when I'm leaving work, I kind of do a quick assessment to make sure I'm set up for the next day, which is really a simple-minded process. But at home, it's really to unwind. I very rarely bring work home. Jody and I cook a lot. We go out to eat. We love wine. So we just kind of relax and kind of charge that battery, both, the physical battery and the emotional battery for the next day.
That's awesome. So now, what's the best way those of us who are listening can get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is probably via email. The one I use the most, I've got a couple of them, but the one I use the most is the easiest to remember. It's tryan@smashburger.com.
Tryan, RYAN, @smashburger.com.
Correct.
So Tom, thank you. This is really amazing.
My pleasure. It was great.
So today, Tom Ryan left us with incredible amount of nuggets, and I just want to do a quick recap of some of the big ones that will stay with me personally for a long time. The first is how Tom defined new products by function and form, and how to make sure from day one the core objective is purpose, and he talked about these two words, influence choices. Then there was this big caution that most of us we can need to go through and talk about is stop spending time blunting each other. That is not the path to win big. And that's the part where when you talked about creating opportunities, which is finding the latent demand, the phrases that really hit home were what is there but people are not happy with, what is not there but will make them happy. And I really think that foresight is the power. And that's the part where you just broke it into three parts. One is trusting that intuition of your psyche that you get it. Then you connect that, because without that confidence, you cannot go forward and meet that unmet need and finally make a meaningful difference. Also loved when you talked about what words or phrases that's not in your dictionary, mediocre and consensus. Those are very important, I think, to avoid, because once you go through. The be kind was such an amazing advice for all of us in any industry, is very important for us. And finally, that whole concept of don't be scared to take the left turn, because to me, many a time when we are, as you mentioned, we are on an easy path, life looks all settled. The big win comes when you take that risk and take that left turn. Again, Tom, this was such an incredible learning from you, and thanks for taking the time to share. And thank you all for listening to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun. This has been truly a big pleasure to share and bring learnings from Tom Ryan. And for those of you who are listening to this live, thank you again for listening to this on Facebook. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with your friends. Thank you again, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Arjun.
You've been listening to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen, founder and CEO of Zen Mango, brand whisperer, top brand growth driver, and a former Fortune 500 executive who has been called one of the most marketing intelligent minds in the business. To learn more, visit www.zenmango.com. Share this podcast with your friends and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.